This is the Mchose Ace68, and it may just be one of the best budget Hall effect gaming keyboards on the market right now. But before we get into the video, I do want to mention that this keyboard was sent out to me by Mchose, but I'm not being paid, and every opinion given is mine and mine alone. Now, let's get into the unboxing experience. So the first thing you'll see in the box is this piece of cardboard with all the button mapping on it, though it is all in Chinese, but I'm sure you all know what a keyboard layout is, so I'm sure it's fine. Right behind the keyboard is another box, which has a pretty nice braided USB-C to USB-A cable, which seems to be a few foot long, a decent keycap and switch puller. As well as that, there's also this nylon band with a few screws, which you can put on the little tab on the left of the keyboard, which we'll go over later. And a few extra switches for if you accidentally bend a pin or if one of them just breaks. And the last thing in the box is obviously the keyboard itself. It comes nicely packed with 2 foam pads on each side of it, as well as being wrapped in a really soft plastic bag. It also has a pretty nice piece of plastic on top of it, which you could definitely use as a dust cover for your keyboard later on. Now that all that is out of the way, let's get to the build of the keyboard. The first thing you'll probably notice when looking at the Ace68, other than the 68% layout, is the relatively unique topographic keycap design. Made with a PPT material, the keycaps allow the RGB lighting to shine through all the translucent lines. As well as that, the keycaps have south-facing printed letters on them, which I will say aren't the most translucent, but they still look great and you can definitely still see the letters on them. If you don't like the topographic design though, you could choose from 4 different types of keycaps on the Mchose website. There's a black and white one, as well as a black topographic design, which is the one that I have, and a white topographic design. The case of the Ace68 is made from a pretty nice feeling plastic, and the top plate is made from aluminum alloy, making the structural integrity of this keyboard something you will not have to worry about. The aluminum top plate also has a part to play with the weight of this keyboard, coming in at just above 1 pound. Inside the Ace68 is a Pro-On foam pad in between the PCB and the aluminum top plate, as well as a silicone pad on the bottom of the case. Another part that makes the Ace68 sound the way that it does are the TTC Uranus magnetic esports switches. These switches can go as low as a 0.1mm actuation point, or as high as a 3.4mm actuation point, or a full key press. The Uranus magnetic switches are rated for about 100 million key presses each, making their durability pretty high up there with all the other high-end gaming keyboards. Speaking of sound, here's a quick sound test of the Ace68. I personally think this keyboard sounds really nice, but if you don't like the sound of the switches that I have on mine, you have the option to choose between 5 different switch types on the Mchose website. However, one thing to note is while each switch is different, they are all Hall effect switches, so every feature on this keyboard that has to do with the switches will be the same across all of them. If you're curious as to what each of the 5 switches sound like, I'll leave a link to a video that shows all of them side by side down in the description. As well as having Hall effect switches, the Ace68 has a pulling rate of 8,000 and a latency of 0.1 milliseconds, which is actually crazy coming from a keyboard at this price range. It also makes this thing a beast for competitive games, as well as anything else that every single millisecond counts. The keyboard does come default at 1000 Hz pulling rate, but you can easily change between 1000, 2000, 4000, and 8000 Hz pulling rate in the Mchose website that we'll go over later in this video. The PCB of the Ace68 is also hot swappable, meaning you can swap in and out compatible switches to your liking. This also allows you to use the extra switches that came in the box if you ever need them. The Uranus magnetic switches are also, as you can tell from the name, Hall effect switches, which means you can customize them like crazy. But we'll go over all of the software capabilities a little later in this video. Going back to the hardware, flipping the keyboard over, you'll see 4 rubber feet, 1 on each corner, the Mchose logo printed in the middle, and 2 adjustable feet for angling the keyboard however you feel is most comfortable, whether it be at full height, half height, or completely flat. On the left side of the Ace68, you'll also notice a little plastic bit sticking out, which is meant for the included nylon strap, which I'm not exactly sure what it's meant for, but it's there if you need it. And lastly, on the back of the keyboard, you'll see a USB-C port for the detachable cable. Before we get into all the software features, I need to show you how to access them because it's a little different than most keyboards. Instead of an app you could download to access the customization and software, for the Ace68, all you need to do is go to the product page on the Mchose website and click the WebDriver option. Once you do this, you'll be brought to a page fully in Chinese, which I don't know how to read, so I had to use a translator. Next, click the blue button on the top right. Once you do this, a little box will pop up asking you to choose your keyboard. Once you do, click the bottom left and change the language to English. I'm not sure why there's not an English version up until this point, but Either way, you're now into the software. Now we're going to go over all of the software features that are available on the Ace68. The first feature being adjustable actuation. Now I'm sure if you know a bit about Hall effect switches, you were probably expecting this. With normal mechanical switches, the average actuation point is around 2mm or half of a key press. But since the Ace68 has Hall effect switches, this gives you the ability to customize the actuation point to whatever you feel is most comfortable. When it comes to FPS games, every millisecond can count. Having the ability to essentially remove the physical latency of pressing down a key can be extremely helpful and help you in a lot of tense situations. You can customize the actuation by going to the Mchose website, clicking trigger settings, then click individual setting keys to change the switches individually, or press global setting keys to change them all unanimously. But no matter which option you choose, you can change the actuation by using the slider, and since the keyboard has onboard memory, you can set it and leave it. The next feature is rapid trigger. Setting your actuation point to an insanely sensitive 0.1mm can be super helpful to reduce the key travel latency like I previously mentioned. But doing this also means you have to lift the key all the way back up to that 0.1mm actuation point, or essentially fully letting go of the key just to be able to press it again. But with rapid trigger enabled, that essentially removes that entire issue. With rapid trigger, when you let go of any downward force on the key, the switch will almost immediately register that you aren't clicking it anymore, allowing you to stop moving in-game quicker without needing to let go of the key entirely. As well as that, any downward pressure on the key, even if you're below the 0.1mm actuation point, will activate the key and register that you are pressing it. This essentially eliminates the latency of both pressing down the key and letting go of the key, which makes movement in games a lot faster and way more precise. You can activate this feature by going to trigger settings and toggling the quick trigger option. This feature also lets you customize the sensitivity. I personally find 0.4mm to be the perfect balance so that you don't accidentally let go of the key whenever you're trying to run forward. The next software feature on the Ace68 is Snap Tap. Normally when pressing two of the opposite movement keys in games, your character will come to a complete stop because your inputs are contradicting themselves. But with Snap Tap, or SOCD as it's called in the software, you can select two separate movement keys. When doing this, the most recent input will override the previous one, even if you're still holding it down, and vice versa. For example, let's say you select A and D. If you hold down A, then press and hold D while still holding A, the keyboard will disregard the input from A, and your character will almost instantly start moving to the right. This lets you have more advanced movement in games, as well as making strafing in games like CSGO much more easier and precise. The next feature allows you to have multiple functions for one key, depending on if you're holding the key down or clicking it. By going into the Mchose software and selecting MT, you could choose which key you'd like to use. Then select any key, whether it be a normal key or a hotkey to change the volume of your PC, pause or unpause your music, or even refresh a web page that you're on to activate whenever you either hold or click your assigned key. The next feature of the A68 is Dynamic Key Press, or DKS. This allows you to have 4 separate functions on one key depending on 4 separate actuations. I'm going to be completely honest, I could not for the life of me figure out how to use this feature. So we are just going to skip this one, but if you guys have this keyboard and you know how to use it, I'd appreciate you letting me know in the comments. And lastly, to bring all the other features together is switch calibration. This is used to make sure every single one of the A68 switches, whether you got new ones or not, register properly. But if you don't really have a need to manually recalibrate your keyboard, there's also an adaptive dynamic calibration system, which Mchose claims continuously fine-tunes the response of the keyboard in real time automatically. When buying this keyboard, the A68 can range from $50 to $80 depending on what switches you choose. So that was everything that you need to know about the A68 keyboard. Whether you're looking for a keyboard to buy or you just watch this video for entertainment, I hope you got something out of this video. I appreciate you guys' time, and I'll see you in the next video.